For Indonesia, relations with rival superpowers like China and the United States have always been a balancing act.
Indonesia always always declare itself to be neutral.
Indonesia has engaged in free and active diplomacy to reap the benefits of having 1 million friends, 0 enemies. But as worsening China-US relations continue to polarize the region into rival alliances, can Indonesia maintain this balance? Home to 278 million people, Indonesia has long been a leader in Southeast Asia. It's the only country in the region that is in the G20 and is a founding member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Indonesia's leaders often see their role in world affairs as a neutral third party who can act as a bridge between rival nations in times of crisis.
Indonesia akan terus memainkan peran sebagai bridge builder, sebagai bagian dari solusi.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo's recent visits to Ukraine and Russia are just the latest sign of this approach. Indonesia has offered to help mediate between the West and Iran over its nuclear program, and maintains diplomatic ties with both North and South Korea. Its relationship with China and the US is a similar balancing act. To see what this looks like, you only need to look at 2 places, Bandung and Batam. China has invested, as part of its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, an estimated $7.9 billion in Indonesian infrastructure projects, like this high-speed rail line linking the Indonesian capital Jakarta with the country's 4th largest city, Bandung.
Ini adalah kerjasama besar antara pemerintah Indonesia dan pemerintah Joko.
The high-speed rail line was meant to begin operations in 2019. Instead, in 2022, it's 3 years past the deadline and at least 1 year from completion. Once a promising sign for China's ability to beat regional rivals like Japan in high-speed rail projects, the Jakarta-Bandung rail line has become emblematic of Indonesia's concerns over Chinese investment. Still, China far outpaces the US when it comes to investment in Indonesia. China is the 3rd largest investor in the country, with some $24.9 billion invested since 2000. The US, on the other hand, funded some $20 billion over the same period. But while China has focused on economic investment to win favor, the US has taken a different approach, increasing defense ties. Indonesia has hosted US military officials for joint exercises and exhibitions which showcase the country's armed forces. The 2 countries historically collaborated on counter-terrorism efforts. But in recent years, this cooperation has shifted to a new front, the South China Sea. The US is spending some $3.5 million on a training center and naval base in Batam, an Indonesian island on the edge of the South China Sea and right in the middle of vital shipping lanes. The biggest threat to Indonesia in the South China Sea is China itself, which is embroiled in a maritime dispute in waters around Indonesia's Natuna Island.
Yes, sir, you are in Indonesian waters, sir. Please move away and go back to your territory, sir.
要 cause senders please send your cause to your portable.
It keeps causing problems with its 9-dash line. So there's just a lot of problem of grudges from Indonesia toward China.
So far, Indonesia has managed to remain neutral in the face of intensifying US-China rivalry.
We'll also stand by our friends as they uphold their rights. And that's especially important as the PRC adopts a more coercive and aggressive approach to its territorial claims.
中方注意到美方关于印太战略的发言，我认为所谓印太战略是打着自由开放的旗号，拉帮结伙搞小圈子，绑架裹挟地区国家，针对特定的国家。
Indonesia has unsuccessfully tried bringing the 2 parties together before, including during the 2018 APEC meeting in Papua New Guinea.
不能搞小圈子，不能强加于人。
China's taken advantage of the United States for many, many years, and those days are over.
The meeting ended with member economies failing to agree on a final declaration, a first for APEC.
but I don't think it'll come as a huge surprise that there are differing visions on particular elements in regards to trade.
Since then, the relationship has only grown more strained. A recent poll conducted in 2022 found that 82% of Americans held negative views of China, a 6-point increase over the previous year's polling data. Numerous surveys conducted in China show similar levels of distrust, with 64% saying that China-US relations were worsening. In Indonesia, 60% said that Indonesia should join in efforts to limit China's influence in Asia. But if a war between China and the US were to break out, an overwhelming majority, 84%, say Indonesia should remain neutral. So, what does this all mean?
If the tension between the United States and China increases, and Indonesia has to pick a side, my prediction is that it will choose United States because United States has always been less threatening than China.
It also means that economic investments, while important, aren't enough to tip the scales in China's favor.
China has done a lot of economic investment in Indonesia, so if China really wants balance against the United States in Southeast Asia, it cannot simply focus only on economy. Economy is important, but it also has to look at more in far more dimension. It has to stop being myopic, focusing only on Beijing interests, but it also have to look at what Jakarta wants.